Dr. David Clark.
Mr. Speaker, listening to that speech, I wonder whether that minister really is as familiar with the bill as he ought to be. Unfortunately, this bill will actually increase costs to business in the short term. This bill will increase costs to business in the short term. And that is why we on this side of the House are reluctant to support this bill without reservations. We will be supporting it. We will be lending our support because we hope that this policy can be properly implemented over time. We are embarrassed for the government for the fact that they haven't ironed out the obvious things that can be fixed up front that could make this a real boon for business. The idea of a single number for business has been around for a long time. This government's had attempts at it before, and it is an excellent idea. It is an excellent idea. It is incredibly frustrating for business to have several different numbers, to come back again and again and again to different government departments with different numbers in order to get what should by right be access to government services for every business. Instead, with this multi-numbered system, there is an increased overhead, there is increased compliance as those numbers are updated and tested and verified throughout government. So we have an overly complex system. Nobody in this House, I hazard to say, would disagree with the intent of this bill. The intent is very, very worthy indeed, Mr. Speaker. But what the government has failed to outline is a plan, a clear plan for how the bill's stated purpose will be achieved. That is, A, to enable businesses in New Zealand to interact more easily with government, and B, to reduce the costs of business transactions in New Zealand. I will explain this more in my address, Mr. Speaker, because initially, at least, it is absolutely beyond dispute that we are creating another number. There are only a small group of government departments that will have this service available initially. For all other interactions with government, other numbers will be required. So there will be multiple numbers right from the start, and there'll be a hurdle initially because a new number will have to be set up for this New Zealand business number system to work. So existing businesses will get another number, yet another number. So we only hope that the next step will happen, which will mean that the existing numbers are gradually reduced. But hope we must, Mr. Speaker. Hope is all that is left to us when one has read through this bill and seen that the government has not allocated suitable resource to make this happen. Why no IRD number used? Well, Mr. Goldsmith explained to us that an IRD number would not be suitable as an international business number. Nobody's disputing that. That was not the point at issue. If the international business number was suitable, why would the IRD not adopt it? Are they worried about security issues? Is the government saying that this new number will not be secure enough? Is that what they're saying? Or are they saying that they don't have joined-up government? Because what I hear from officials is that they were never able to resolve those issues behind closed doors, and now ministers are wearing the consequences of that. The Cabinet is forced into an embarrassing position where it hasn't got the policy straightened out and it's trying to implement it anyway. There are still many hurdles to get over. And the Labor Party finds itself agreeing with Federated Farmers on this. The initial list of government departments does not include agencies such as WorkSafe New Zealand and Immigration New Zealand. And often, people are interacting more often with local government, which also is not a part of this system. So you have multiple numbers. Imagine your average worm farmer out there wanting to interact with government, doing the right thing. The average worm farmer, completely worried by the new legislation introduced, is trying to find out from WorkSafe New Zealand what their obligations are to avoid the kind of catastrophes that happen all the time from worm farming, according to this government. Well, I'm afraid that worm farmer will have to have probably, if they're interacting with some departments, this new number and also a completely separate number for their interactions with WorkSafe New Zealand. If they've got overseas workers working at their worm farm, they'll have to have another number again for Immigration New Zealand, a whole series of numbers. And we see very quickly that this bill has not yet got to the place that it needs to get to. We see that this government has not yet shown how it will get to this utopian single number because it hasn't done its homework yet. It is a good idea. It needs to be supported, but this government needs to outline a plan as to how it's going to get there. Instead of worrying about what's going on this week at Waitangi, instead of the Prime Minister worrying about the flag and where the next 26 million is going to be spent on this pet project or that pet project, they should be focusing on the nuts and bolts of making sure that New Zealand businesses can get on with the productive stuff that they do. They're wrapping them up in red tape, and that's not unusual for this government. We know with the child support legislation, they put additional obligations on small business. They tried to introduce car park taxes. They have a penchant, this government, for introducing new obligations on businesses. And unfortunately, here we have another example in the short term. And as I say, on this side of the House, we hope they'll get there. We hope that they will get to the single number. But at the moment, we find ourselves agreeing with Federated Farmers that the system is not right. We also agree with the Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand, who say that there is without significant uptake, there is a risk, let me quote, that the identifier is not integrated and utilised widely and just becomes another number, rather than a replacement for the many current identifiers as is intended. They share the same concern. So we see these business organisations expressing this concern also. The Labor Party is certainly not on its own here. It is clear that businesses that work with a number of departments will have to obtain a number of numbers. Now, the additional yet another number is the opposite of the purpose of the bill. That point is clear. It will cost more in the short term. So businesses will have to comply. And that could be tolerated if we had the long-term plan. So I want to urge this government to outline that plan, to say how it is going to roll it out across the whole of government, how it's going to resource departments to implement the necessary changes so that they can make interaction for business a whole lot easier. That's what's missing here. That is what's missing from that side of the House, a plan, a credible plan for rolling this business number out across the whole of government. So I look forward to the next speaker explaining how that might happen, where the resources are coming from. Is it going to be in the next budget? I guess we'll wait and see. But my hunch, and what's been shown up from the appearances of officials at select committees, is that they have not done that work yet. They have not outlined how it's going to roll out over time. And so they are asking, effectively in this bill, New Zealand businesses to carry more cost and more compliance until they sort their act out. And we urge them to get busy on that project rather than the distractions that they've been busy on up until now. And there is a real risk too with this number that it doesn't ever get across that hurdle. There is a very real risk that businesses wait and see, that they do not sign up too quickly to this new system because they are not convinced it's going to be implemented. They are worried that it's going to be another number. And then that other government departments don't invest in that resource because they don't want to sign up to a system that's going to become redundant and yet another number, replacing their existing systems if there isn't a plan for a complete rollout. This is a bill, as I said at the beginning, that has a very good intended outcome. But as we've seen before with this government, there have been other attempts at this that have failed. This government needs to sort out how it's going to do this in a way that is credible. It needs to allocate the necessary resource to make this happen in a way that is credible. We don't want another, what was the name of that system for the education payroll is out? NovaPay. We certainly do not want another NovaPay, and Minister Parata across there, I think, would agree with me. We do not want to go down that track again. But that is the risk of coming out with half-baked solutions and trying to implement half-baked solutions before you've outlined where the end point is and before you've signed up all of your departments to deliver the services and before you know that the plan is in place. And that is why this government needs to display to New Zealanders that it has done its homework. That it is a government that's getting more arrogant, it's getting more out of touch, it's losing the track that it once had, and so we see them happy to implement the system, imposing extra costs on business in the vague hope that they will sort themselves out over time. We urge them to do that from this side of the House. We will be supporting the bill, but we're doing it with those reservations, and they are significant reservations. We stand alongside Fed farmers, we stand alongside the Chartered Accountants, we stand alongside most of the business people that submitted, that expressed their concerns about the way that this bill is being implemented. This government needs to do its homework, it needs to lay out a credible plan, it needs to have a bigger vision, and we urge them to do that so that this bill can be implemented in a way that really and truly does make doing business easier with government. It's about time.
I call Melissa Lee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity.